Pickleball Diaries presents Cling on the Court with your host, Lily Brown. Let's go!
Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome back to Cling on the Court. Let's cracking some pickleball code today. And today we're going to talk about unlocking the zone. And of course, we have our beloved performance coach, Jeff, here with us again. Hi, Jeff. How are you?
Hi, Lily. I'm doing great. How are you doing?
I'm amazing. Thank you. I'm really excited to talk about this topic again today, more in depth about unlocking the zone. I think we were mentioned about the concept of unlocking the zone in the previous episodes. And I know you're expert in this area, and you've been training the youth athletes. And yeah, do you want to talk about the unlocking the zone? So, what is a zone?
Yeah, so I think the easiest way to describe the zone or flow state is where you're basically in an unconscious state. So everything is happening and happening well. So you're performing well and it feels very unconscious, like you're not having to consciously think about what you're doing. So everything seems to be flowing naturally and your execution is great. And you don't feel like you're thinking, you feel like you're just present. And generally, we describe the zone as like our ideal performance state. And one of the things that's sort of crucial to understanding how we can help get into the zone is finding that balance between our arousal level and optimal performance. So there's this sort of famous or well-known graph or curve where you see that as your arousal level goes up, your performance often gets better.
Hmm.
Okay. Or if your arousal level gets too low or you get too aroused or over aroused, your performance can decrease. So it's finding that optimal level of energy and arousal level to help you perform at your best. So for instance, there's some players out there that are quite calm and relaxed, and they perform better when they're in that sort of like slightly relaxed state. They perform more optimally. And then there's players that need to really like ramp themselves up and be really high energy. So their arousal level is slightly higher, and that allows them to perform at their best. But with both players, you can be either slightly under aroused or over aroused, and that can affect your performance state. So it's learning where, like, what arousal level and level of energy is sort of optimal for you as an individual. But again, going back to what is the zone or how does it feels natural. It feels unconscious, like we're not thinking, we're just super present and we're performing well without having to think about anything too specific.
So, what you're saying is the zone is more for the competition. So when we are like it's maximize our performance during the competition, does that go into the zone stay apply to your rec game and then your drilling, your practice, daily practice?
That's a good question, and 100% it does. So it's really hard to become a really good performer. So someone who performs well when it matters, which is in competition, like in tournaments. If you don't practice the way you want to perform, it's not going to be natural when you get into competition. It just won't happen, or it'll happen less frequently. So developing the right rituals, habits, attitudes, and intensity in practice absolutely is crucial to carrying over those things into your performances so you can perform optimally in competition when it matters most.
Yeah, so are we talking about mostly for getting to the zone? It's
Mhm.
mostly for the competitive player, or do you think it's also for the rec player, for everyday casual players? Do you think they can reach the zone state?
Yeah, for sure. Anyone can get into a good flow state or into the zone. But the thing is regardless of what level or whether you compete in sort of real tournaments uh, a lot or don't compete in tournaments too frequently, like anyone can get into the zone or flow state. It just happens to be easier in practice because there's generally less on the line and there's less consequences or perceived consequences to not performing well, and there's usually less distractions when we're practicing. So, get anyone can get into the zone. It tends to be easier to get into the zone if you're an experienced competitor who's played many matches and many meaningful matches. And that's why we see like, a lot of players that are performing at a high level, it could be that they have great technical skills and they basically have good decision-making skills, but it's really their ability to perform psychologically and physically in competition because they have so much experience and they have a lot of real matches under their belt. So of course, the more you compete, the better you're going to be at getting into a flow state because you're used to all these external factors that could possibly prevent you from getting in the zone. You're used to experiencing all those factors and all the feelings that come with competing. So of course, you'll get better at getting into the flow state with experience.
Yeah, thank you. I want to share a bit a personal story of mine here. Is my very first tournament. A good friend of mine asked me to play a pickleball tournament. I think that was 3 years back. We're both new to pickleball, so we were competing 3.0 at that time, women's double. And I never played the sports. And actually, this is my very first sports tournament ever. So there's actually a lot of matches, a lot of teams, a lot of matches. And I was very nervous in the beginning. And somehow we get out of round robin. We even get into, I think we got it to the medal round.
Okay.
And I don't know how, somehow in the last match, I think I'm getting to the zone, the flow state.
Mhm.
And I still can remember that was 3 years back, but I still can remember the feeling of being so calm. And I don't even remember the score at the moment, and I don't care about the score, just hitting the ball. It's that feeling is sensational. Like it's just super in a super deep calm state. I don't know how I get it. Somehow it's there. And I think in the end, we get out the tournament, our very first tournament. I think that was a bronze. But regardless, the medal at that time is already not important. It's like
Mhm.
reaching that state. It's just so beautiful.
Yeah.
So I think I somehow getting to that state a few times in the past year, but really don't know how I got there.
Yeah. Well,
And so would you like to share some of your experience, like what's the secret to getting to the Zoom? And then can we train ourselves? How and how to train?
yeah, well, that's a really good example, and it's probably one a lot of people can relate to. I can relate to it. Like sometimes when you first start and you're less experienced, you have very low expectations, or you don't even have expectations. You're playing the game for fun. It's your first tournament, or maybe one of your first few tournaments, and you're just so happy to be there, and you're just loving life, and you're loving what you're doing, right? And
Yeah.
you're not concerned about medals, ratings, how you stack up against, XYZ player. So your expectations are either non-existent and you're just playing and you're loving the feeling of playing. And that usually when that happens, you're just enjoying the process. So you're not even thinking about all these other things that could take you out of the present. And that's what, when we're really present, as we talked about on the last episode, that's when we can really get into our flow state because we're not overthinking or we're not thinking about too many things. But then is what happens sometimes when we gain experience or we have a little bit of success, like after we win our first medal, we start to have maybe some expectations of ourselves that, hey, I want to get that medal again and I want to do even better. And then maybe others even have expectations of us and they may even mention it to us in conversation. So now we start to have these external factors or these other thoughts that can enter our mind and are really just distractions from being more present and staying in the moment and just really enjoying the moment and enjoying the process. So your example is a good one. Sometimes when you're new to a sport or new to competing in pickleball, you don't have any expectations. So it's really easy to just have fun and enjoy things. When you think about in your daily life, when you're doing things that bring you a lot of joy, that just don't feel like work, like it could be hanging out with family or friends or enjoying a really good meal. You're not like consciously thinking about too many things. You're just so present and enjoying the moment. And that's when things feel great. And it's the same when you're playing pickleball, is when you're just enjoying the process. Nothing else matters and nothing else can enter your mindset or a mind space. And so performing really well becomes easy. It's unconscious. But yeah, when you gain experience, there's all these other factors that you start thinking about, and that happened to me. Like a good experience, sort of similar to yours, but almost on the flip side, is like when I first started competing in pickleball, I was having like a good amount of success at like the 4.5 level. I was improving a lot and I was working really hard. And like I eventually got drafted into the CNPL in the first year that it existed. And then I put all these expectations on myself, and I felt like I needed to justify that I got drafted in my own mind. Like I'm like, oh geez, now I have to really prove that I belong here. So I was thinking about more of these external things that, really detracted from performing well or could detract from performing well. So it became more challenging to perform well because I was playing at a higher level. And so I was like, I was fearful of not performing at my best, fearful of letting teammates down. And these are challenges that I think a lot of people face, especially in team events or just with their partner. So, anyways, that's just an example of like how these new expectations, whether they're real or self-imposed, can affect performance. So, there are ways to help yourself get in the zone and like having rituals, routines for practices, but also pre-match routines, pre-tournament routines. All these rituals and routines in practice and at tournaments can help you eliminate distractions and give you a sense of familiarity so you know exactly what you're doing in competition and help yourself get into the flow state. That's one element of trying to get into the flow state. But yeah, anyways, just all that to say is like our level of experience in competition often influences our ability to get into the zone.
Yeah, so you mentioned there's interesting detail is the ritual.
Mhm.
So how important is ritual like triggering the zone? And do you intentionally kind of developing your own ritual, or you kind of collect from your own habits, say, okay, these are the ritual, so I should keep them because they kind of bring me the good luck and help me to get into the state. So how do you developing these rituals?
Yeah, a lot of it's trial and error. So you have to find out what works for you as an individual. And I think we talked a lot about that in the last episode, is that every individual is different. So how they get into the flow state and how they can find ways to perform at their best, it's individual. So I think I mentioned it as like, imagine you're at a tournament. If you don't have any rituals and routines, like you might be eating food in between matches, and then suddenly they call your match, and you're chatting with someone while you're eating, and maybe you're eating too closely to your match that's about to start. Like all these things can affect performance. So developing routines and rituals so that when your match is called or when you're playing your first match, you enter that match feeling ready to compete. So you feel very present. You feel physically sort of like elevated. Um, so you have to be aware of like how do you want to feel when a match starts or a tournament starts? And then what are the rituals and routines that work for you? That can be like nutrition and hydration routines, physical preparation and warm-up routines. Um, could be how much do you want to socialize before or in between matches? Like some people like to stay loose by socializing, and it keeps their mind off of the match. Like, because some people can focus so much on their upcoming matches that they almost get too worked up and too nervous by overthinking things. So for those types of players, maybe socializing a bit more is a good way to keep them from overthinking things. And then there's some players that like socializing is a distraction, so they may need to isolate themselves more. The type of music you listen to, maybe you need to listen to music that calms you and brings your heart rate lower. Maybe you want to listen to more up-tempo music. But these are all considerations that go into your rituals and routines, which hopefully will help you perform at your best. So you as an individual have to consider those things and then determine which rituals and routines work best for you. So those are sort of like the preparation and pre-tournament or pre-match routines. And then you also have to like sort of examine like if you're not in your flow state during a match, like what are some of the things that are helpful to get you there, right? And that can be, there's so many things. They can be breathing routines either during the point or during shots. It can be focusing on certain tactics. It could be focusing on certain technical cues for yourself. It could be in between points, like what are your rituals and routines in between points? It could be making sure you have a really clear and intentional game plan with your partner. Those are all things that contribute to improving performance and getting into the zone. And again, can be highly individualized.
Yeah. And you also just touched upon a very good important point is the breathing skill. And it seems like breathing is just so normal. So
It's not.
how should we breathe? I know it's tough. Back to one of my tournament past experience again, and I was very, very nervous, very tight, but outside I didn't realize I was nervous and tight. And until my partner, she mentioned, Lily, you forget to breathe. I was like, yeah, I wasn't even breathing.
Mhm.
And the thing is, when you're tired, nervous, often you don't even realize you're nervous and tired. So, like, I know intentional breathing skill is very crucial and important. And yeah, do you mind explaining like how to breathe?
Yeah. This another good example. So when you're in your flow state, probably you're breathing really well. Like you're not holding your breath. You don't feel tense and you're not holding onto your breath. So physically you feel loose and you probably have like pretty regular breathing, like exhaling regularly, inhaling regularly. But yeah, when we're competing, we can be nervous, fearful, or upset at, a past mistake, and that can affect our breathing. So we start holding on to our breath, and that can just dysregulate our sort of flow state and our mind state. So there's like, there's the breathing during the rally, there's breathing in between points, but there's nothing like breathing helps the body relax, right? So if you have regular breathing patterns, it helps settle your heart rate and generally leads to a feeling of looseness. And if you're loose and feeling loose, generally your coordination is better, your perception skills are better. And often if we're holding our breath or not breathing properly, we may have some sort of background thoughts that are distracting us from the being present. And if we're not totally present and enjoying the moment, our perception skills generally are not as good. So we react late. Our execution gets a little bit worse because we're a little tight or rigid, perhaps. For me, and again, it's not like everyone should do what I do, but like for me personally, breathing out through contact on every shot, I find is a really good way to stay loose and coordinated through the shot. And it helps keep me present and it helps ensure that I exhale, which generally will be followed by a nice inhale. So it helps regulate my breathing. And one of my friends, Matt from Kingston, we used to joke because a lot of photos that were taken if I was playing matches, like as I was hitting a shot, I had what people call duck lips. Like my lips were sort of pursed, they're like sticking out because that's me exhaling through the shot. So I look kind of funny in some of these photos, and that's my exhale. And for me, that helps me perform closer to my optimal level, or hopefully helps get me there. So breathing out during shots, like if you watch top tennis players on TV, like when you're watching some of the Grand Slam tournaments, like you'll hear those players grunting and they're almost yelling or just it's like their version of exhaling. Grunting is really a letting go sensation. It's like, ah, and that's the reason those players are grunting. First of all, it's just a sign of their intensity, generally speaking. So it shows they're in the moment. But when you grunt, that's an exhale. So when you grunt through the shot, it's the feeling of letting go. And letting go is important to sending shots with good consistency and execution. So it keeps you loose through the shot. And generally, like if you try and breathe, like you want your breathing to sort of match the shot that you're hitting. So there's a little interesting experiment you can do. If you can try and breathe really aggressively and quickly, like push out the air really quick and do a slow, smooth motion with your arm, it's really hard to dissociate those two things. Usually, if you breathe out really quick and aggressively, your physical action will match your breathing. And then if you breathe slowly and long on your exhale, so your physical movements will generally match your breathing. It's really hard to dissociate those two things. So breathing in a manner that is sort of matches the shot that you want to hit is a really good way to improve concentration and be in the moment, but also improves execution of the intended shot. So that's breathing while you're playing, but then it's also important between points to have rituals and routines, which often could include breathing. So if you are tight, it's like making sure you recognize that you're tight, or maybe you're under aroused, but making sure that you have some sort of breathing routine that helps settle your heart rate, or maybe even helps get your heart rate up if you feel you need more energy. But having certain routines between points is really important. So I can give you an example of one of those. So with our younger players in the tennis world, when I was working with a lot of young, like high level junior players, when we were training them, there was times where we often put a focus on how they manage their energy and focus between points and their ability to refocus so they can perform really well on the next point. So a little trick that some people might find helpful out there is we had this sort of ritual and routine called the 3 R's, and the R's stand for release, review, refocus. So let's say that you make an unforced error and you're not happy about it. So you need to release, like it's okay to release a little bit of negative emotion, like a it could be just like a or maybe you let out a yell occasionally. You don't want to get too carried away or too negative because it's hard to get back into a positive state. But like release, or a release could be a fist pump or a let's go after a positive point, like maybe you hit a winner. So that's your release, is like let that point go in some way. And that could be a release of your breath as well. And then the next part is review. So if you need to make a quick adjustment after a mistake, quickly review what happened. Was it a decision-making error? Was it like more of a reception error? Like you had the right intention, but you didn't move well enough to execute the shot. Or maybe it was just a sending error. You had the right intention, you were in good position, but maybe you clipped the net and just need to tell yourself to hit the ball a bit higher. So make a quick review of what happened and make a mental adjustment, and then refocus is the third step. So before you're returning serve or before you're serving, is what are you focused on? So a little process focus to help you start the next point well. So release, review, refocus. And part of that routine could be something about breathing if you feel it's applicable. So that's a good little trick for helping players refocus before each new point begins if needed.
Yeah, I think you like it was very good tip you just mentioned. I wonder if the listener have paid attention to that, is when we practice our shadow swing at home, we should also practice the breathing. That's probably most of us never link them together, practicing inhale and exhale together with the swing. So yeah, I think that's a very good point.
Yeah, and just to add, I'll make this quick, but if you think about, like I've done a fair amount of hot yoga on and off through my life, and I think anyone who's done yoga, when you first, you'll relate to this. When you first start the class, you often enter the class or the room, and you're thinking about everything in your life. You're like, oh, what am I gonna have for dinner? Or like, oh, I need to get groceries after this, or whatever. You have all these different thoughts. And sometimes when you enter a yoga class, it can be hard to settle your mind. But that's often why we go to yoga. We go for the physical and mental benefits that a yoga class might provide. And eventually, like a huge part of every yoga class is your breathing. The instructors are constantly talking about your breath work along with the poses that you're doing. And usually, after some amount of time has passed, you end up in this like sort of zone and trance when you're doing yoga because you're focused on your breathing and you're just focused on a little bit like how you're feeling and making sure that you're focused on your breathing routines to like let yourself go. And before you know it, you're not really thinking, you're just in this sort of present flow state. And all those thoughts that you had when you entered the room at the beginning of the class are now gone. So all that to say is breathing, the physical and mental part of breathing, it's a physical act, but that breathing really helps settle us and get us into the present where we're not thinking, we're just sort of enjoying the present moment and feeling very relaxed and calm. So anyways, just to reiterate how important breathing is.
Yeah. And thank you. So, okay, so now we're all going to work on our breathing as our routine. Um,
Important.
so, and then there's another um, uh, kind of terminal specific situation is we often say we get cold
Hmm.
among like the matches or between the matches because the nature of the pickleball tournaments is we play 15 points and have to wait and
Yeah.
wait.
Yeah.
If you keep get going, it's good. But then I remember there was one tournament we went and we've been winning all the games, and then we have to sit an hour and a half. And then we were chatting and eating, and suddenly go back to the competing, and we lost to the team which we beat previously.
Hmm.
Easily, we lost by a big margin because we feel like we're not ready. We're cold.
Yeah.
So, like, how to make sure you're not being cold among the between the matches in the tournament?
That's again really good example and scenario that we all have probably experienced. So again, this comes down to rituals and routines, right? And again, the more you compete, the more you experience these types of whatever you want to call them, distractions or external factors that can influence how we perform. So that's a good example. And that's where it's like, okay, how do we want to stay ready? Because like we don't often know exactly how long we're going to be waiting. So we may not want to sit for too long because if we sit for too long and then our match gets called and suddenly like our muscles have gotten tight and stiff and we need to jump up and get ready to play and we're not allowed to have a warm up anymore because this isn't the first match of the tournament. So generally you're expected to have like a 2 minute warm up and that's it. And then you've got to compete. So, how do you manage time in between matches? So, maybe you have a sort of rule of like, okay, I'm not going to eat anything that's hard to digest or anything large. So I'm just going to have small snacks throughout the day of a tournament. So I'll eat like a big breakfast or a big dinner the night before so that my body has the calories it needs to perform. But then obviously you need to continue to eat throughout the day and hydrate. But like what you eat and in what quantity is important because if you eat too much or too soon before a match, your actual digestive system is now burning calories and spending energy on that, which can detract from your energy on court, but it also just doesn't feel good. So that lack of good feeling is a distraction to performing well. So yeah, so your routines and rituals and learning like, okay, I can sit maybe for a couple minutes after a match, but after that, I should probably just walk around, maybe occasionally do some jump rope or like some like, light jogging, something to intermittently keep your body activated so that you're always ready to go if your match gets called. Maybe you want to constantly be sipping water or your electrolyte drinks like in small quantities, but frequently. So you don't want to chug too much at once where your belly gets too full too quickly. So maybe you just make a habit of, you know, drinking and hydrating regularly, but with smaller quantities so that you don't get overly full. So those are all exactly like really good examples of things that can take you out of your flow state and experienced competitors know how to manage their time and manage their body and manage their nutrition and hydration between matches so that they can perform better.
Yeah, and so the next question I want to have for you, it could be a long question. If we're running out of time, we can continue in the next episode. And also coming from a real example, a friend, he's pretty high skill and in the rec game, and he's just unstoppable, competing at pretty high level. But he cannot play tournaments. So it just every tournament he gets very tired. We actually talked about this, like what happened and how he help. And then coming from the last episode experience, I tell him, okay, you like from your advice is you need to train, um, be more in the zone, even in the reggae.
Mhm.
But he's just like a super duper, very nice and kind person. And his reggae face is very friendly.
Yeah.
So, like, I don't know, like, do you have a advice for players like that? And how to help them to compete? If it's
Yeah.
too long to answer, maybe we save this for the next episode.
Yeah, no, I think it's not, hopefully not too long, but generally, like, so first of all, in a general sense, and I don't know if this is, but like really nice people or really kind people generally are like empathetic of others and, they might be sensitive or whatever. And so sometimes in a tournament setting, like, it can be just a different feeling and they maybe are really sensitive to how they perform because they don't want to let down their partner. So that might be one example of like something that stops them from performing at their best because they're so worried about doing well, not just for themselves, but because they don't want to let their partner down. And in rec games, like there's not much on the line. Like, so it's easy to be loose and you're not worried because even if you let your partner down, it's just rec games. Your partner's not going to be that upset, I don't think. So it's easier to be happy-go-lucky and perform at your best. So, um, for someone like that, like playing in more meaningful games. So maybe at the club you guys play at, if there's any ladders or leagues where there's a little something on the line, is a good way to like experience the feeling of real competition and the feelings and emotions and thoughts that come with that. And then you can learn to deal with what are those thoughts that are distracting you from playing better in competition. Um, and then for someone like that, they should try to compete more. Like they should sign up for more tournaments and learn like what they're feeling during competition and what are those feelings they're experiencing and why are they experiencing them, and then how can they overcome those things. So, it's like, okay, I'm really nervous about letting my partner down. So, okay, chat with your partner before the match. Let them know that's how you're feeling. And often when you express that to your partner, they'll actually end up being really supportive and telling you, like, hey, it's okay. Let's just make sure we have a good game plan. I've got your back no matter what. And sometimes just hearing that from your partner by expressing how you're feeling will make you feel better. Or be like, hey, it's all good. Like, let's just really focus on having a great game plan so we can put our mind on our game plan. And maybe that helps that person. Or maybe by them expressing how they're feeling, you can be even more supportive than you might usually be, knowing that your partner needs that support, and that might help boost them up, where they can start playing looser and more free, and they're this less worried about whatever, which allows them to be more present. And that when they're present, things start to flow more naturally and become automatic, and then they perform better and everything goes better. So, if someone's playing great in practice, but not in tournaments, they probably need to compete more if they desire to improve performance in competition. And they may need to put something on the line in their practice matches. So maybe if it's like the loser buys lunch or something like that, or, you put like a little something on the line, or you join more leagues and ladders where you're not just playing rec games, they're like inter-club games. So they're with people but maybe there's something on the line. Like, if you win your matches, all your matches this week, you move up to the next court the following week to play with the stronger players. Or if you don't, you might move down a court for the following week. And then you're used to feeling that there's something on the line or there's a consequence to your performance. So you get better at identifying those feelings that you're having when you are playing with consequences and how to manage your emotions to better perform in competition.
Oh, thank you. I was very complete and also right on time
Yeah.
answer. Thank you so much for another amazing episode. And audience out there, please like us, follow us on YouTube and all the podcast platforms. And yeah, looking forward to hear their feedback. And we'll see you in the next episode, Jeff.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to continuing the conversation about how to get into the zone.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, let's talk this again. Okay, have a good day and talk to you soon.
Take care.